And the beauty as well, how both of those pieces of the process are necessary of going into the space that I am nothing, of like you're going through a mourning process. There is this grieving process of who I was and who I used to be and my role in my relationship in the world and letting that go. And now you're shifting into this other like, what do I want to create? Who do I want to be? And like, ooh, I could do anything. Right?
You're listening to The Creative Imposter, episode number 36. Welcome to The Creative Imposter. I'm Andrea Klunder, and I'm so happy that you are here joining me for this very special interview with Monica Martin. Monica is a spiritual embodiment teacher, and you might be thinking, what does that mean? Well, let's just say meditation, art, creativity, psychology, intuition, yoga, and boxing. What? Oh, yeah. Monica's a boxer and even teaches boxing in addition to leading guided meditations and working with clients to trust their own intuition. Since we've been exploring a theme this month in both the Creative Imposter Facebook group and the Chicago Women's Creative Collective of creative minimalism, I will keep this introduction also fairly minimal. Here's what I want you to know. When I recorded this interview with Monica, I spilled my guts. When I was editing, I listened back to it and I was like, whoa, why did I say all that? There's something about her presence, about the way that she listens, about her intuition, and about her very specific way of being that just makes you want to tell her everything. Seriously, I felt like I was having a therapy session, and there was a part of me that wanted to edit it out, but I decided to keep it because not many people, don't get me wrong, I love to talk, but not many people can get me to spill my guts like that in such a short space of time. The other thing that I want you to know is that when I was editing this interview with Monica, I had to keep taking breaks to get up and do something different or walk around because her voice is so resonant and soothing, and her pacing and the way that she talks, it's so soothing and relaxing that I would go into like a trance of just listening and completely forget that I was supposed to be editing. So anyways, I know that you are really going to enjoy this interview with Monica. And I also hope that you will stick around till the end of the episode because Monica has a very special offer for you. Of course, you will be able to find links to things, including how to connect with Monica at thecreativeimposter.com/036. Okay, now it's time to hear in Monica's own words what this magical, mystical, psychological, spiritual, embodied creative work she does is all about, and how you can learn to form a stronger bond with your own intuition by trusting the messages your body is communicating to you.
So I'm a spiritual embodiment teacher. And as far as what I do is it's a culmination of different aspects. It's perfectly fitting for what you were saying of coming from such a different perspective. And my passion and my joy of what I really teach others how to do is not just how to connect with their bodies, but actually how to be with their bodies, how to orient themselves. They can actually drop their awareness and drop their location to different parts of themselves. And then it'll access like the cognitive process, the emotional process in a much different way. And currently I'm working on my dissertation, which is on transforming trauma through spiritual embodiment and spiritual practices. And I love it because I look at trauma really differently from a lot of how the general population does. I look at trauma as an opportunity for spiritual growth and as an opportunity to really come back and connect with who you are and be clearer in who you are and really to embody and really be like this living, fleshy, spiritual being in the world.
So when you say trauma, I feel like that's a word that can encompass so many different things. How do you describe trauma, and how would someone know if that is something that applies to them?
Yeah, I've had a really fascinating relationship with the word trauma because I also had times where I did not like the stigma and I didn't like the word itself because it has such a negative connotation with it. And when I identify trauma, you're right, there's a huge range. It could be emotional trauma of emotional abuse. It could be a physical trauma of like a car accident. It could be a natural traumatic event, such as like a hurricane or some type of natural disaster. And to me, the commonality between all of them is that it's a situation where you're either physically in or you're witnessing it. So a lot of our world is vicariously traumatized because they're watching the news and they're reading all what's happening, especially right now in the US and the political climate. It's where your sense of survival is being threatened, is the essence of it. And so, any place or moment where you are physically threatened, physically harmed, or even you can go into the mental and the emotional, why people get traumatized is because their identity is being attacked. You're doing something wrong. You're not good enough. Whatever you believe in isn't right. And so, being told that externally from friends or family or whoever that is, that threatens what you believe your own sense of identity is. And so, that traumatizes you. And what happens in that moment is that you have a choice to either believe whatever that external piece is saying, that you're not going to make it, you're not going to live, you're not going to survive. And you change who you are, you change how you relate to the world, or you go inside. And what I mean by going inside is I connect to my spiritual practices through my body, and I connect into different parts of myself and like, is that true? Is that true for me? And when I get to that answer, it becomes really clear this person in front of me is reacting to something that's not real or their own fears and their own securities, and it's not my truth. Or I'm going to jump on board with what they're reacting to and become very fear based. And the word trauma is so heavy right now. And especially when we look at what the US as well as the whole global is going through, people's sense of safety and sense of survival is being rocked. People who you had communities and you had support from the government all the way down and being recognized and just being recognized for, yes, you exist and you have these rights and I will protect you, is now being flipped upside down. And so waking up every morning and not knowing what we're flipping on through the news feeds and the channels of what's happening and the ripple effects that happens globally as well as just our own intimate neighbors, it's putting everybody in this fearful survival state. So whether you are personally affected or not, you can feel it. You can feel like the emotional tension, the frightenedness, and people rising up to respond and engage. And people who are also just, they're saturated and they're turning it off and they can't even deal with it because they don't know what to do. All of these are responses to what's happening right now. And so, what I propose for my own practice, what I'm aware of is like, how do I shift and change with myself first and not being reactive to what's happening to me externally, but come back to myself first. And then once I have that clarity, then I am really clear as to what my next steps are and how to move in the world with a sense of love and compassion and understanding. One of the things I was realizing just 2 days ago, and it was just really hitting me, like I'm watching our leaders who are there, and I'm having such a sense of compassion because I am watching them as humans and I'm seeing the struggles with just mental struggles and psychological and emotional reactionary things that are happening. And I'm also saying that what their actions are and what they're doing is not okay, while still having compassion for them as a person. So, how do I hold this space for I'm having compassion and I'm feeling empathy for you, and what you're doing is not okay? But
Okay, I'm
that,
so glad that you just dove right into this topic because
I'm sorry, I just kind of went all over the place. I'm like, that's where we're gonna be.
No, that's great because when I put this in the list of like possible topics that we could talk about, it was at the very bottom, right? I'm like, oh, this is kind of a bonus if you are interested in this and if you want to go here and if you feel like talking about this, because this isn't a political podcast by any means, and nor do I want it to be that. But this is something that is so on my mind right now. And as both a healer and a creative person and an intuitive person and somebody who just generally wants to do the right thing in life, right?
Right.
There's certain things that we can't avoid looking at, really. And I found that going into the beginning of this year, I had such a hard time personally taking in, as you said, all of this news and all of this media and all of this information and looking at what was happening and then going about my day and my life and functioning as a normal human being. And I took a hiatus from producing any podcast episodes. And I wasn't really even sure why. I just couldn't find a way to do any creative output, really. Like all I could do was just scan through my Facebook feed and feel terrible, you know, and feel overwhelmed and look through my social media for any shred of something inspiring, something uplifting. And yet I felt this sense of responsibility of, oh, I should be doing something or I should be doing something more. And yet my body felt so lethargic and heavy. And I really just wanted to be in my bed, hiding under the covers, drinking tea. And yet my mind was like, you have to do something. You have to be more active. And it brings to mind this question of activism and what activism actually is all about and what we can do really that is effective. And I keep coming back to meditation teachers and spiritual teachers and even psychologists, because I know that you're studying psychology and that's your background as well, that say that there is, it's very easy to point externally at the source of our trauma or at the source of our emotional upheaval. And it's very easy to look outwardly and say, this person is doing this, and this person is causing this, and this person is wrong, and this person is a racist, and this person is a misogynist, and all of these things. But that a lot of what we're feeling and experiencing in our body is coming from within.
Yes.
And that we need tools and practices to address that internal thing that's happening before we can really effectively outwardly address the external things that need changing.
Yeah.
And I've been having a hard time putting that into words, but like listening to you talk, I was like, yes, now I can express this.
Yes.
When you say you're talking about using spiritual practices and spiritual tools to do this work, whether it be, you know, the current political stuff and our Facebook feeds and our news cycle, or whether it be some past experience that we had to deal with or that we're still dealing with, what kinds of practices do you recommend?
So a lot of different things come to mind. And before I go completely into that, one thing I do want to name and acknowledge, and I'm so grateful that you brought up, is victimization. Victimization is what you're speaking to of it's easy to point to, this person did it to me, I'm in this position, I'm in this place of because they're the perpetrator. And that is part of the experience. However, that really traps you into being the victim. And so my practices that I do are ways that I let go of that victimhood, let go of that narrative, and even just shifting my language. And in saying that person did this to me, like I experienced physical abuse, I experienced emotional abuse. And it's looking at what my experience was. And it brings that attention to me, my own body, and my own self. And as far as what practices are there so you can come back to yourself, because it really is looking at your own experience. Like all these things happen outside of ourselves. And I believe it was Fritz Perls who created Gestalt therapy, who is saying that if you're not triggering other people, then you're not doing your job. Like the point of being triggered and activated is so you can go inside and so you can heal yourself. And especially when it comes to trauma, I am a somatic person. I am also, as much as I do practice yoga, I also am a boxer. And boxing has been one of the biggest parts of my healing aspect. And there's a whole process to it. And the reason why I think it's so important that, especially now, people find a way to express their emotions in a physical activity, whether it would be dancing or boxing or movement or whatever it is, because it helps you actually transmute the emotions, like the actual inside your tissues, and it helps you find your own way of expression. And when it comes to boxing, when I go and I work out, I intentionally, like, this is what I'm working on today. I want to be really grounded. I want to really move from my core. And so I'm bringing my intention, and what other beliefs or ideas or fears that are keeping me from that will come up in my session, as well as the emotions. And so it's just setting that intention. This is what I really want to come back to. And once you can physically come back to yourself in what other physical form that is, then you can start to play with like the subtleties. There's a meditation that I've been practicing lately, and I am just loving because it's really simple. I like very somatic meditations. And what I mean by that, it brings my awareness into my body sensations. And it's not changing anything. It's not, oh, my breath is wrong. There's none of that. There's no judgment. It's just noticing, because we are so in a reactive mode in our heads, trying to make meaning and make all these understandings of what's happening and why. We don't allow ourselves time just to slow down and notice what is happening right now. And it's okay. I have these emotions, and you know what? It's okay. Like, here's the scared little girl who doesn't know what to do, and I'm going to sit right here with her, and I'm going to be with her, instead of immediately jumping to, let's fix it, let's change it, let's get out of it. No, let's give her love, and let's let her cry, and let's let her be sad. And to me, I'm able to access all those things when I get really quiet and I connect into my body. The meditation practice that I've been doing, it starts with just doing a slow scan from head down to my toes. And then I visualize like roots growing out of my tailbone into the earth. Like I'll actually visualize the dirt, and I'll see the rocks, and I can even feel the dampness, and I'll go in. And so much of right now, what I believe in is like, how can you ground yourself and connect to the earth even more while everything's changing around you? Start there first. And then after I feel really connected to the earth, what I'll do from there is there's a candle in front of me. And when I'm ready, I'll open my eyes, and I'll really slowly, while staying connected to the earth, I will bring my attention to the candle. So it's what you were talking about earlier of, how do I come to myself first and then engage with the outside world? But if I'm not grounded and connected first, then I'm just in this reactive space. And I'm just reacting constantly to what's happening in front of me, the stories, the news feeds, or being re-triggered by a trauma. You hear a word, you have a smell, or something will flash you back to whatever that traumatic moment was. So it's so important to figure out like the best grounding practice that you have. And I love nature. I will go out into the trees and go barefoot. And as simple as that is, even if it's taking your shoes off and walking on the grass so you can feel the grass and the dirt underneath your feet, that immediately you can feel your body just drop, because you're connecting in. Like the earth is here to hold us and to support us. And we forget that.
Did you always know that you were going to go into healing work?
Not at all. Like, not at all. I was an English teacher in high school for about 6 years, and I love education. I love working with kids, and I burnt myself out. One of the things in trauma is the overachiever, the overdoer. Like if I can have 10 things on my plate, I will do it because I don't have to look at myself. I don't
Mhm.
have to feel the emotions. And so I was overly engaged in that place, right? And so I found myself in a relationship that was abusive and unhealthy and had overly workaholic driven myself to just breaking point, as well as I was abusing alcohol and drugs and everything else like that. I was intentionally self destructing in a way. And so I just hit a breaking point. And once I took a sabbatical from teaching and I stepped away, and what I did, as Monica usually does, is I grabbed everything I could get my hands on, books and interviews on how a person heals. Everything from psychology to spirituality to the body to everything. And as I was reading everything, it just all clicked. Like it made so much sense. I'm like, well, duh. Like I get it now. And that was, goodness, 12 years ago, maybe even 13 years ago that I was going through that. And so that was the moment and the point that I saw where I was going and what I was going to become as a healer and helping others learn how to heal themselves using all the mind, the body, and the spirit together. I didn't know what that path looked like. I didn't know the way to go because there weren't any schools that existed that taught all of them together. And so I had to create it my own way. But in that moment, I knew this, it was like this visceral light up inside, like where every part of my body, like it is right now, it's just like it's vibrating and excited and like this little girl. I'm like, this is it.
And so, how did you start down that path, transitioning from this space of being completely burned out as a high school teacher and educator, which was something that you were so passionate about and that you
Mm-hmm.
loved doing? How did you transition into this new identity? What were the first steps?
Honestly, the first step was to make the decision to do it. And so I went to massage school because I knew that the physical body was part of what I was going to do. And so I wanted to learn about anatomy. And so I, would get odd jobs here and there working at restaurants and what have you while I was moving through my own educational process. And in on the side, I'd take workshops on spirituality, on meditation, on different forms of healing. And then after I finished my massage program, I became a massage therapist for a while. And it's so fascinating because I believe that every step of the way is all part of the process. I'm coming full circle to being a teacher again. And that teacher part of me is this aspect of teaching spirituality. But I learned as a high school teacher, I
Mhm.
learned patience. I learned how to break it down. I learned how to use their language so they would understand what I'm teaching. And so I took that into the body work. And so as a massage therapist, it was really interesting because I figured that every massage therapist had this understanding of spirituality and subtle energies, and that's not true. There are massage therapists and body workers who are sports therapists who work very clinically and very physically, and they're great at it. And so I was able to extract from working with the body, like how to connect with the body, how to teach people how to connect with their own bodies. And from there, I moved on and I found a holistic master's program. And I got my master's in psychology and emphasis in holistic studies. And that whole process was a really fascinating process because I was all for the licensing route. I was, all scheduled to do my MFT, the internship, and everything else like that. And my last year was my third year in my master's program. And my body just, one thing after another kept happening. I'd wake up in the morning and I passed out one time and, I thought it was food poisoning. And my body just like went into like the shock and chills. And once I started interning, and like every time I take another step further, my body would shut down. And so I finally said, okay, what is happening here? And I did my own internal process and connecting in and like what's going on. And it just, that wasn't the path for me. The educational part, yes. I needed the experience. So I know how to sit with clients. I know how to work with them in a much different way. And so along my path, I was pulling and extracting pieces that, oh, okay, from the psychology, I'm learning how does the mind work? how does it build its defense mechanisms, and how do I engage with it in a way that we're not confrontational, but we become curious about what's happening? Like, that's really interesting. Like, what's it feel like? What's that experience feel like to you? And so I learned all the theories, and I'm able to play with them in a different way. And so moving on my path from there into my dissertation, it's in East-West psychology. So now it's incorporating the spiritual component. Working on my dissertation and my PhD has been this pinnacle of my own internal process of my own healing, as well as the work that I'm creating in the world. Because, like I was saying, that the more structured, traditional, departmentalized, compartmentalized topics, I'm all about how do we blend everything. And what I mean by that is academia and scholarship is all about, it's very masculine in its language. It's very masculine in its research. And what I mean is it's very logical. Like, here's the research, here's what it proved, and this is what the study is going to show. And because these were the experiences, this is how you can reduce it down. And that's not a world we live in. It's not. We can't be reduced down to numbers and common experiences. And so a lot of the work that I do in my dissertation is really about how do I blend both the masculine with the feminine intuitive languages, the felt sense, and how do I take the parts of, like, the body, that's the physical responses of the body, as well as blending what does it mean to actually be inside your body? What does it mean that your body is a state of consciousness? And how to balance all these components. It's a dance. It's not black and white. It's not one or the other. And it's not just that easy to reduce it all down. It's the process of becoming. I look at trauma and I look at all these things that we're doing in the world, is that we're doing this huge experiment of what is this process of consciousness of becoming who we are. And how do we do that with awareness? And what I look at, whether it's politics or not, when trauma happens or not, it's have I become so attached to an identity, to a role? Like, I am a teacher, I am a producer, I am an artist. Am I so attached to that identity that if I have to let it go, that my whole survival is gone? So when a trauma happens, to me, it's an invitation. Like, if I have to let go of that, then what can I become?
That resonates so much with me because I had the experience of my first business. I had been teaching yoga for a couple of years and I decided to start my own yoga studio. And I did that for 5 years and it was rewarding and difficult and challenging and so many different things all rolled into one huge experience. And in the end, after 5 years, I chose to close that studio and
Mm-hmm.
had this huge identity crisis. I
Mm-hmm.
had my first experience truly with depression on a real scale. And it was around that attachment to this ridiculous idea that I had in my mind, which was, now I'm not a yoga studio owner. Now I don't have a business. Now I'm not a business owner. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't have a job. I don't even want to teach yoga right now. And so all of those identities that I had invested at least the last 5 years into creating for myself were gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't know what else I can do. And it really catapulted me into this very bizarre place, which for a while looked like hiding from the world. And then for a while looked like self-inquiry and self-study and meditation. And then eventually became, oh, I am still an entrepreneur
Mm-hmm.
and I can still have a business and it can be anything. I can make it anything I want. And it went from this, like, I have nothing, I am nothing, I have no identity, I don't know who I am, to I have all of these choices and this range of possibility, and I can literally pick anything.
Exactly. Right. And the beauty as well, how both of those pieces of the process are necessary of going into the space that I am nothing, of like you're going through a mourning process. There is this grieving process of who I was and who I used to be and my role in my relationship in the world and letting that go. And now you're shifting into this other like, what do I want to create? Who do I want to be? And like, ooh, I could do anything. Right?
That was part of the evolution of coming to this podcast and this idea of imposter syndrome, because it's just the social thing that we do. Like, oh, hi, I'm so and so. You're so and so. What do you do? Where that's kind of how we identify each other in a social situation.
Yeah.
And for a while, I didn't know how to label myself. I didn't know what to say I did because I felt like I kind of just didn't do anything. Like, hi, I'm Andrea and I'm a human who's figuring things out. You can't really say that at a party or a networking event. And so this idea of feeling like an imposter, right? If I say I'm an entrepreneur and I don't have a business, then
Mhm.
I'm an imposter. I'm a fake. If I say I'm a yoga teacher, but I'm not really teaching any classes right now, then I'm an imposter. And this whole feeling of who we say we are, who we think we are, and who we actually are, and them not matching up is where this idea for the podcast came about.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know, how have you experienced this idea of imposter syndrome, or have you experienced it in your creative life and work?
That is a great question. Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think my first awareness, like I said, came when at the end when I was teaching high school, and it wasn't as a teacher in high school, it was the motivations of why I was doing it. I was doing it because this is what a normal, insane, and healthy person does. They graduate from college and they get a job. And I loved what I was doing, but it was so driven by what I was supposed to be doing. And it wasn't until I slowed down and stopped and realized that I also realized when I would be reactive and like I'd have like emotional anger, which was part of my trauma, but it was also being forced into things that didn't resonate with me. That was the first time I was aware of it. And so that felt sense has been so paramount to me and so important to me as I've been on this path of growth over the last 10 plus years. And it's been hard because I've taken these classes, everything from the body work to the psychology, and it wouldn't feel right. And so I'd be giving them and regurgitating the answers. I'm thinking things that have to do with like law and ethics or clinical diagnosis. And so I can engage in the material, I can respond to them, but I'm not going to reduce somebody down to a label and this is what they have and this is how you fix it. I don't believe in that. And so I was a little resistant and I was very vocal about it. And so I struggled a lot in trying to figure out how do I navigate and find my own voice. And even like when I was a massage therapist and people wanted me to quote unquote fix them, I am all about supporting them while they help their own body heal, but I'm not going to fix you. Even in my current position as a doctoral student, I feel like I've had to really advocate for myself a lot. Last year, 2016, was really hard for me on multiple fronts. One, I was going through intense grief of losing my boyfriend's son in an accident the year before. And at the same time, I was trying to work on my dissertation and create my business and my practice and get everything going all at the same time, right? And so I had all these layers going on. And instead of doing what I needed to do and step back and listen to myself, I just kept pushing forward. I'm like, okay, if I can at least get like my practice going and get stability and just like get some type of traction, then I can refine it afterwards. And what I was finding, especially in the entrepreneurial space, which I think you can identify with, is I was getting so pissed and frustrated because I worked with different coaches and I was in different like programs to help, get your business off the ground and get clients and people to work with or classes or whatever it is I was trying to put out into the world. And my frustration was that my vision and what I teach and how I teach is not normal to the collective. And so when I'd work with different coaches and they would reflect back what I needed to be doing or who I was, it didn't quite reflect back who I was and what I do.
Hmm.
However, I found myself falling into like this guru worship, what I call. Like they have a successful business, they know how to do this. And so I'm just going to follow what they say.
Hmm.
And I would get their advice and I'd be doing what they'd be saying and suggesting, okay, you need to do like Facebook posts and Facebook ads and, different masterminds and all this other stuff. And I was doing it. At the same time, there was a part of me that was like, it was a little girl that was freaking having a tantrum in the corner. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And at the end of the year, and I think it took me into September, like this one big program that I was trying to launch, it didn't get any traction, that I ended up in a deep depression for about a month and a half. And I was like full on, like depressed, fetal position, like what the heck is going on?
Hmm.
And it could not have been the best thing that happened to me because I did try it their way. I learned a lot about like the technical part as well as the way I learn. I don't learn just the details. I understand conceptually what it is they're trying to teach.
Hmm.
Like, oh, they're trying to teach about connection. How do you connect? They're trying to teach expression. Like, how are you confident in your own expression? And so I was able to distill it down into my understanding. But the biggest thing that I learned and the hardest thing that I learned, and it was November and December, I consciously practiced surrender. Like I'd be sitting on my futon and Tavius, my boyfriend, be just looking at me and I'd be so uncomfortable. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do nothing, like nothing. Because anything I was doing was externally motivated because I was supposed to or I should be doing this.
Hmm.
And that even went for like meditating and yoga and whatever. Like it was really clear to me, like, you're supposed to sit here and do nothing. And so Tavius would look at me and be like, how's it going? I'm like, I don't know. This is really uncomfortable. Like, you tell me something to do and I'll do it. And he's like, nope, you're doing exactly what you need to be doing. And so I felt like all the emotions of the year, all the fear, all the doubt. And it took me a few weeks to really get underneath it. And what I mean by getting underneath it is I would feel my emotions. I would journal. And so whatever thoughts came up, I would, write them all down, but doing it without attachment. Like, oh, I'm feeling anger right now. That's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And no story. I'm feeling angry because this person's, no, this is anger and this is what this feels like. And what does it need? What does it want? How does it want to be expressed? And by the end of 3 weeks, it became so clear of my own next steps. And so that's become my own process. Like when I mastermind and I brainstorm with people and co create, I'll take their ideas into account and then I'll come back to myself. I'm like, okay, does that resonate? Does that feel right? Does that feel true to me? Or maybe it wants to be played with. Because if I can't come back to myself, then I'm so disconnected from it. I'm doing it because I think I have to, or I'm supposed to, or this is going to make money. And I've also shifted my business model, I guess, for lack of a better word of saying it,
Mm-hmm.
is like every time when I sit down and I kind of like visualize what are my next steps, I always ask, where am I to serve and where am I needed? Where can I help? And coming from that place opens up the whole door. Like, okay, we need you here. Okay, we need you just to talk to this person right here. And that has been so expansive for me because I'm not setting up this really specific strategic, okay, I do steps 1 through 10 and this will get me to here. Instead, I just look at the next step. Like, okay, here's my next step. And the way it's like unfolding in my life right now is that I just felt like I really wanted to teach again. And so I asked my coach, who just opened up his own center, which is awesome, stoked for him. And so I'm like, I want to teach yoga twice a week. And can I? And so I teach yoga Wednesday nights and Sunday afternoons. And I love it because I'm just connecting people back to their bodies again. And then he asked me last week, he's like, hey, do you want to teach some intro to boxing classes? I'm like, oh my God, that'd be awesome. And So in my mind, I'm like, okay, so they're coming for boxing, which they will be. But then how can I weave in all the other nuances? Like, how can I weave in, like, why, notice how you're holding yourself? What emotions are coming up? What emotions do you want to release into the bag? Like, that's when I can start to play with the other stuff. And so I don't have like a specific agenda. I just keep asking, where am I to serve and where do you want me to be? And as long as I'm showing up as me, that's really what I'm responsible for.
Something that I know about you, Monica, is that you make decisions on a very intuitive level.
Hmm.
And the language that you use when someone asks you a question or when you're trying to make a decision or you're thinking about, do I go this way or do I go that way? You'll often refer to how your body is feeling in that moment.
Hmm.
you'll
Yeah.
say you'll say my heart feels so warm, or I'm feeling, butterflies dancing in my in my belly, or something like that. You always have like a very physical description of what's happening in your body that then informs your intellectual decision making process. I'm curious if you could just, for someone who the idea of paying attention to what your body is doing in order to make a decision about how to move forward or next steps, if you could
Mhm.
just describe for us what a yes feels like in your body and what
Mhm.
a no feels like in your body.
Yeah, absolutely. Really basically, a no feels like contraction. For somebody who's just starting out, I suggest you just focus on one part of your body. And some people, like their belly and their gut is a good place to start, or their chest, like where their heart is, and to actually place their hand there. So they're bringing their tension as well as they can feel their body underneath it. And a contraction, what I mean by that is simply that. It's like my muscles will actually do a little contraction. They'll tighten up and they'll get a little smaller. And if it's a yes, it'll feel my tissues in my body start to soften and actually start to expand. And one thing that people can do to test it out is just start really, really simply putting your hand on your belly. And so for you, Andrea, you just would put your hand there and you would say, my name is Andrea.
My name is Andrea.
And what do you notice?
I can feel my breathing, feels steady, calm.
Yeah. Now say, my name is Joan.
My name is Joan. I stopped breathing for a second.
Right? So starting with just little practices like that will help you cue into your own body's way of communicating to you.
Hmm.
Because everyone, their body is very unique to them. It's like having a relationship or a partner you've had for 20 years. Like, you have your own language and your own way of connecting. And so your body is the same way. Like, I have this one client and it's her forearm. Like, she talks to her forearm, and when she sees her little hairs go up, she's like, that's a yes. And so, but she's created and cultivated her relationship, like that's how she talks with herself. So once you really establish your relationship like that, you can move from your name to even your age. How old am I? Or you can even move into just things around your room, like that's a red stool sitting in front of me. And from there, like, is it a good decision for me to go to class tonight or to teach a yoga class? And so just continuing to cultivate that, your body will really cue it in. And there's more complex ways once you really kind of build it. And what I mean by complex ways of really evolving the relationship of like, if you set an intention for yourself, like a 5-year goal or even a single 1-year goal, like by the end of this year, I want to be teaching classes and writing a book and, just having this real big vision. And if you really have this vision that is aligned and resonates with your body and who you are, you can constantly cue into yourself along the way. Like, okay, is this class, is this program, is this aligned with my bigger vision? Yes or no? And your body will cue you like, yes. Is this the person I need to be working with? Yes or no? And every single time, the body never lies. It like never lies. The mind knows how to like distort and protect us, and denial and repression, because it protects us.
Hmm.
But the body, when it responds, it never lies. It always leads us to the truth.
Okay. So, for somebody who's listening to this interview and thinking, whoa, this conscious embodiment stuff sounds really cool. And I want to learn how to be more intuitive around my creative life and work and the choices that I'm making. And maybe I'm ready to move beyond this state of trauma that I've been existing in, whether I realize it or not,
Mhm.
and make some new choices and take some bold steps, but they're not really sure how to get started. What advice would you have for that person?
That's interesting. You know what? My mind immediately goes to process artwork. And the reason why, especially when it's tapping into that creativity, and the term I use of process art and process drawing is something I use a lot, is that you're ready to take the next step, but you're not clear about it, what it is. And when I do process drawing, I'm not creating a specific image. It's all intuitive. Like I have the pencils and the crayons out in front of me, and I just go, okay, the red's calling to me. I'm picking up the red, and okay, and a squiggly line wants to come out, and not thinking about what you're doing, and just it's almost magical as far as what will come out and the image that will come out in front of you as far as how to tap into that creative expression that you really need in that moment. Because the nonverbal, I think, is really a place that we do not cultivate or practice enough, because the verbal is all where we find our story and our meaning making, which is important and is part of life. But being able to tap into our intuitive and our creative expression, there's no words there. It just doesn't exist there. And so, doing exercises like the process drawing or the process movement, where you're not thinking in language, it really connects you into your intuition. And the times when you do hear the thoughts come up, because they will and it's natural, just notice it. Like, hey, I hear you. Thank you for helping me out. Now I'm coming back to this again. And it's learning to tap into that space really will just light fire to your creativity and your intuition. And the other thing, the big thing it's going to do is it's also saying, yes, I want a relationship with you. And I'm listening to you, and help guide me and show me, how do you want to be expressed? Because just saying yes to these aspects, the creativity and the intuitive part, which we've been so accustomed to silencing so we can just survive, it's turning that back on again. And the more you dialogue and the more you connect with those parts, the more it's going to talk to you in more different ways. And you're going to start to see synchronicities. You're going to go for a walk, and you're going to see the answer to a question you journaled about in the morning. Like, well, yes, I'm listening. And so the more you say yes, and just starting by just like the creative drawing and saying, I'm listening to you and show me what you want to do and where you want to be, is the very first step.
And last question, is there
Mm-hmm.
anything else that you want to share that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Wow. There's so many. We covered so much.
Hmm.
There isn't necessarily anything. I just, you know what? The only thing that keeps coming to mind, I just really want to emphasize, is in play. And especially when it comes to intuition and creativity, and just like what I'm launching this year, I'm calling the embodiment experiment. It's an experiment because we have such an opportunity to play with curiosity. That's really how it's going to just burst open the doors of creative expression and tapping into however the divine downloads want to come through you, of inspiration and muse, and allowing it to just be playful. And I wonder what that's going to do. I wonder what that feels like. Look what I can do. And just saying that, I could feel my body and everything start to expand.
Hmm.
And it's when we start to think about, what should I be doing and how can I do it right? And even like, how can I creatively express myself in the right way? There's this contraction and this tension that our lenses starts to get really small.
Hmm.
But even just like, I wonder how it wants to be expressed. I wonder what would happen if I did that. And it gives us permission to explore, and it gives us permission just to try things. I think we need a lot more of that in the world.
We do need more of that in this world. Did you love that interview? Do you love Monica? Do you want her just to talk you to sleep every single night? Seriously. Okay, so of course, you're going to want to connect with Monica, and you can find all of that information at thecreativeimposter.com/036. This includes a link to a free 7-day exploration with Monica called Discover Your Inner Resources. This includes meditation, creative expression, body, felt, sense, intuition, basically all of the really cool and sometimes a little odd and definitely very effective things that we discussed in this interview. And did you know that if you are listening to this episode in Apple Podcasts, formerly iTunes, you can actually click the show artwork, you know, the big square with my lovely self sitting there, looking out the window, meditating. You can actually click the show artwork on the top half of the screen, and the show notes with links will magically pop up right there in your podcast app on your phone or your iPad. What? I didn't even know that. I just learned that this week, and I'm the one making this show. Also, did you know that if you're on an iPhone, you can click the 3 little dots, you know, ... ellipses, in the bottom right-hand corner, click Share Episode, and then message the episode to a friend who you think would really enjoy listening. And that friend, if they're on an iPhone, will be able to play this episode right from their Messages app on their phone without having to subscribe or anything. It's like a little text message gift. And it would be so wonderful for everyone if you could share this episode or any episode or any of your favorite podcasts. Of course, I'm sorry that I'm saying iPhone, Apple Podcasts as if I'm somehow an affiliate of Apple. I'm not. That's just the tech that I have, and so I know that it works. If that works also for Android, that would be wonderful if you would let me know, because I have no idea. I'm so grateful for everything that Monica shared with us and really enjoyed talking with her and editing her voice. And I know that we are going to be collaborating on some things in the very near future. So, of course, stay tuned for that. And if you're really digging this intuition stuff, Charlotte Alea, who I interviewed 2 episodes ago, has a limited time offer for the Daily Tarot package that she put together just for the Creative Imposter community. You can, of course, check that out in the show notes as well. And last but not least, if you haven't already, please join the Creative Imposter Facebook group, because you are going to get an opportunity to connect with both Monica and Charlotte in some upcoming Idea Live Facebook chats. They will be on live video with me talking about our next theme for the Creative Imposter, which is creative woo-woo. This is mystical practices to support you in your creative workflow. And they will be live in the Creative Imposter Facebook group over the next couple of weeks, along with Samantha Mont, who I will be also interviewing for the podcast. You are going to love all of them. Join the Creative Imposter Facebook group, linked, of course, in the show notes, or you can search for it, whatever your heart desires. And be sure to check the event schedule so that you can get a chance to connect with Monica, Charlotte, Samantha, me, and who knows who else I'll invite to chat. This episode was mixed by Edwin Ruiz of Mondo Machine. Our theme music, as always, is by Jovia Armstrong. I thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a week filled with opportunities to tap into your body's own primal intuition.